Hey, how's it going, everybody? My name's Tony Avina, and I want to help you learn how to design t shirts. Today, we'll be working in Adobe Photoshop, so let's get started. First thing we want to do is create a new document, so we can go to File, New, or we can click Create New here, or I can use my keyboard command, which is Command N on Mac and Control N on Windows. Okay, so once we're here and we want to create a new document, we're going to make it 4,500 pixels by 5,400 pixels at a resolution of 300 pixels per inch in RGB color mode. Once we have all that inputted, we hit create and we're onto our artboard. So the first thing I want to do is grab my type tool, and the typefaces I'll be using today are Passion 1 and Mr. Defoe. Both of them will be linked in the description below, so you can just download those and install them before you start this lesson. Okay, so I'm going to use Passion 1 bold. I have bold and regular. I'm going to use bold. Make it 450 points the size. And for my anti-aliasing here, I want none. And I'll explain that in a second. So first thing we're going to do is type in all caps rad. And we can make this, we can change the color of this type. We use the type tool over here. Then this swatch up top, I can click on that. And for now, we'll just make this black. Okay, so I have that. And let me zoom in and show you exactly what I'm talking about with the anti-aliasing. So here you can see that we have these jagged edges. And if I can add sharp, crisp, strong, or smooth anti-aliasing. And that's going to add a little bit of a blur to smooth the letters out. But we don't want that because it's going to make selecting everything much harder while we're in the design process. And when this gets printed on a t-shirt, that's going to smooth out anyways, just from the nature of the printing. So let's switch this back to none. Okay, now the next thing, what I really want to do here is I want to change this background color. So I'm going to click on the background layer over here in my layers palette. If you don't know where that is, you go to Window and find Layers and click on that, and it'll bring up your layers palette. Then I'm going to press D on my keyboard, and that's going to default to black foreground, white background. So now I can go to Edit, Fill, and we're going to fill this with black. So now I'm going to go back to my type layer that I just typed out. So just click on that layer, go back to my type tool, click on the swatch, and now we're just going to make this, we'll make it white for now. And then we're going to type out our second line of text. So we're going to change this from Passion 1 bold to Mr. Defoe. Undo that. Make sure we're not on our type layer. So I'm going to go back to my type tool, change it from that to Mr. Defoe regular, 250 points. And then I'm going to type in here 80s. When I'm done with that, I can come up here to my move tool, click on that, and it'll commit what I just typed. Okay, so now I have that centered. If I'm not sure, I can select one layer, hold down Shift, select the other layer, and then use my alignment tools in this top toolbar. I'm just going to align horizontal center, and that's centered. Okay, so now I'm going to go to my layer that says rad, type, rasterize type layer. So now this type is not editable anymore. It's just a raster image, and I'm going to do the same thing with the 80s one. Click on the 80s layer, type, rasterize type layer, and that's rasterized. Okay, so I do not want this white color for the rad. So I'm going to go to my color palette. You go to Window Colors if you can't find it. And I like to work in HSB, which is Hue, Saturation, Brightness mode. So to do that, you just click this little menu icon on the top of your palette, switch it to HSB sliders, And I also like to have this set to current colors, and that makes it easier to select between the two different colors. So I can make this one color, can make this blue, I can make the background red, and then I can select any of the colors in between. You can have it to the RGB spectrum, CMYK spectrum, any grayscale ramp, but I prefer current colors. So now, the next thing I want to do is go to my rad layer, and up here above the layers, you see this thing, it says lock, and there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 icons. I want this first icon, which is lock transparency. So that's going to lock the layer transparency. So now, all I have on that layer is this word rad. But if I took, let's say, a pencil tool, I can just draw on top of it, and it's never going to leave the boundaries of that white or whatever color's there. So everything transparent, I can't touch. I can color this as much as I want. Okay, so now fill that back in white. So now what I want to do is I want to put an outline on this. So I'm going to click on my layer here, this 80s layer. Then I'm going to go to my layers palette on the bottom. This icon that looks like a page, create new layer. Click on that. So now I have a new blank layer. So what I'm going to do from here is mouse over this the layer that says rad on the layer icon, hold down Command, and it would be Control on Windows, and click. And that's just going to load whatever's not transparent as a selection. And from there, I want to take my sliders. I'm going to go 0, 0, and move this down to 30. So you can just type in 30 right there. Go to Edit, Stroke. When this stroke window comes up, I'm going to go 60 points in the center. So 60 pixels, center. And then right now the color set to black because here I had this background color icon selected when I really wanted this foreground one selected. So if that happens to you, you just push X and it'll swap those. So okay, I'll go back here to Edit, Stroke, 60 pixel, center. Okay, and it just adds a little outline. And since I did center, it adds it on both sides of the border of each letter. And that's going to be important for us later. And since this is layered, the white is covering the excess part. Okay, so now I have that, and I want to start working on my chrome effect. And I don't want to affect the layer that says rad. I want to use this, keep it for a selection, do whatever I want with the later. So I'm just going to select the rad layer, and then I'm going to duplicate the layer. So you can go to Layer, Duplicate Layer. Okay. And now that's made a copy of this layer. And it still has the transparency locked. Okay, so now I want to start working on my effect. So I'm going to take this color I had, 0030. I'm going to move it a little bit more to the left. So go 10% on the brightness. And then we're just going to fill that in. So when we go to Edit, Fill, it'll ask us foreground color, mode normal, opacity 100%. Okay. All right, so now that we have that done, what we want to do is make a selection in here. And we're going to go to our Lasso tool. And since I'm using a mouse for this lesson and not a drawing tablet, I'm going to use this polygonal lasso tool. And that makes it a little bit easier to control. So I'm just going to click outside of this R, I'm just going to make little tiny hills across here. And then I'm going to click just around the letters here. Okay, so that's going to be our working selection. Now we're going to go to our gradient tool. Here you might be on the paint bucket tool. You just click and hold until you see the flyout menu. Click on gradient tool. You can also push G on your keyboard. And then I'm going to select this color here, which is, if you're in hue, saturation, brightness, 192, 72, 71. And it's important when you're doing this to be aware of what colors can and can't be printed. So if I go too saturated with something, I'll get this out of gamut warning here. It's a triangle with an exclamation point, and it shows you what your color is going to print like. And that means that it's not printable in the CMYK spectrum. But here we should be okay. Oh yeah, one more thing. On the Lasso tool, I like to make sure that anti-alias is unchecked, because that will give you another crisp edge, as opposed to having anti-alias where you'll get a feather on everything. So now I'm back to my gradient tool, and I'm setting my mode to screen. If I set it to normal, it'll give me the gradation of just that color that I selected as a spot color. But if I use a blending mode, then there's different things I can do with it. So let's say I'm using the screen blending mode. It's just going to get lighter each time I pull a gradient. And I can also use something like color dodge. And that kind of does the same thing, but you can see these colors get out of the printable gamut pretty quick. I can hit Command Y on my keyboard and see what it would print like in CMYK. And this just turns to gray. So I'm going to use my tool set to screen. I'm going to hold down the shift, and that's going to constrain my gradient to just a perfectly vertical. If I don't do that, it can be diagonal or whichever way. And for this, I don't want that. So linear gradient set to screen. I have my opacity set to 80%. Hold down shift. Just click and drag up. 2, 3, 4. Do about 5 times until it looks about how I like it. Okay, then from there, I'm going to click and drag from the top. But I'm not going to overlap too far into it. I just want a little bit of that light bouncing back in. So I'm going to go to select. I need to invert my selection. And I'm used to doing all this with keyboard commands, so we'll just do that. Oh, here it is right here. Select inverse, which is Command-Shift-I. And now that's going to select everything. It's basically going to reverse the selection, so everything that wasn't selected is selected now. And I'm going to take my gradient tool, again, with the same color, and just click and drag from the bottom a little bit. And I can push Command H on my keyboard to hide my selection and bring it back up. And that looks about good to me. Okay, so now the next thing I want to do is I want to have an inner outline here. So I'll find this layer right here underneath with the outline, which I should have named in the first place. Outline layer kind of makes it easier to keep track of things. I'm going to select that, and now you'll see that the selection, remember we overlapped here, so the selection is inside of my letters, but it's also outside of my letters. So I can go to my rad copy layer, go to image, adjustment, hue saturation. I push Command H so I can hide my selection. Then I'm just going to drag this lightness up a little bit to about 45 and click OK. So now I have an outline and an inside line. I can go to my outline layer here, click lock transparency, go with my original color, this blue that I was using for screening. Then I can go image, edit, fill. I can fill that in blue if I want. I can keep it gray the way that it was. Whatever you think looks good, you can adjust it. You can make it any color you want. But we'll just keep it that original gray for now. Okay, so now that's done. And what I can do here is I can click all of these layers. I have 3 layers with the rad stuff on it. And hit Command G, which is edit. Actually, it's under layer, group layers. And now these are all in one group that I can hide and bring up as I want. And this will also help you organize your layers if you're working with a whole bunch of layers to have things in groups. Okay, so now we're going to make this 80s into a neon effect. So we'll go back here, we'll click on the background layer, make a new layer by clicking that icon. And now I'm going to push Command and click on that layer icon to select this white. I'm going to go select, modify, expand it by 10 pixels. Then we'll go to select, modify, feather it by 8 pixels. And then I'm going to use this swatch color here, which is 357, 44, 94. Then go to edit, fill. Foreground color, normal, 100%, okay. And then we're going to go back to our background layer here, make a new layer. So select the 80s layer by holding down Command and clicking on that icon. Then we'll go select, modify, expand. We'll try 40 pixels this time. And then select, modify, feather, and we'll try 20 pixels. Then we're going to use this purple color, or magenta color, sorry. 344, 76, 88. And then we're going to fill this just like we did with the last one. Edit, fill. Foreground color, normal, 100%. Okay. And that's our neon. And that's pretty much it for these effects. I can click these 3, group them. And then if I want, I think this is kind of light, so I can go back and load this outline layer by command clicking, go back to my rad layer, bring up my Huesaturation, which the keyboard command for that is Command U. And I can make that lighter if I want, like that. And then I have my chrome and I have my neon. And I always have my selection here. If I don't like anything, I can just select that and fill it back in. But that's pretty much all there is to it. The important thing here is that you really get to understand why you're doing the things you're doing, what the expand selection does, what feathering the selection does, and just keep practicing this and it'll start to make sense. And just really pay attention to what you're doing. You get used to it and you can use these techniques in other designs. If you like this one, give it a thumbs up. If you didn't like it, give it a thumbs down. If you want to see all of my videos, please subscribe and click on the notification bell. We'll see you in the next one, and keep on designing.